Well, hi, I am Daryl, and I write LGBTQ plus somewhere between new adult and young adult. It's in that fun little medium where it's like 16 plus, which um, is young adult, but a little bit older.
Right.
Um,
It's popular. It's a
it
popular
is.
range. Yeah,
It is a popular range. It's doing really well, I think. My
definitely.
Wicked Cup.
Nice.
I'm a theater kid, so.
I was the Wicked Witch in the Wizard of Oz middle school,
cool.
randomly.
That's fun.
I haven't done any theater since though. So yeah, I'm Edie, and I write fantasy. And Minerva is a young adult, and the Mortal Being series is just adult fantasy. And I think I mostly will probably write adult because I seem to do that in my own head. But I'll imagine I'll write some more young adult eventually. Okay.
Awesome. I'm Nicole Wells, and I had this crazy notion to write a series where each book was like a different genre. So Upspark is like YA, but it kind of matures as it goes along. And then my newest release, Midlife Magic School, is actually paranormal women's fiction. So it's like midlife, like the title. So I write the whole range, but it's all got aspects of fantasy and romance in it.
Honestly, I think that writing multiple genres is better. I always hate the idea of being constrained to a box. So I constantly make this joke with a lot of my followers. I'm like, will you guys still like me if I suddenly just release a children's novel?
It's more fun that way. As a writer, it's more fun to switch it up.
Because, different facets inform different aspects of your writing. So, if you write romance and decide to write a mystery, maybe it'll be a romantic mystery. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's actually one that I wrote, a paranormal romance mystery that has humor in it.
That's funny. I love genre bending though, so.
Me too. All right, so this is not on the right page. All right, there we go. So I start with an easy question. What voice, and I guess if anyone doesn't know, voice could be first person, third person, can be second person, that's not as common. So what voice do you write in and why? And you can also talk about if you want the people write third person omniscient, or you can write really close. But, okay. Go ahead, Daryl.
I think it actually has a lot to do with my acting background, because I have a background in acting, but I tend to write in first person a lot. And I actually find writing third person to be much more difficult. And like I said, I think it comes from the acting background where we're constantly looking at things from like, oh, what do I think about the situation? How do I work myself through the situation, rather than how does they or how do they?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I tend to write first person. But like I said, I like to explore, so we'll see what happens next.
I thought it was interesting. I actually feel like I have the opposite thing. So I've tried writing first person, and if I write first person, I get so deep in the character's head that it like freaks me out. And I'm like,
oh no.
Like I can't walk away. I can't like set it down, like walk away. I'm like all messed up. So
that's funny.
I'm a firm third person writer. I don't enjoy writing first person. But I do like writing it close. Like I like being in their thoughts and in their feelings and seeing the world from their point of view, just with a little distance for my own mental health.
Yeah, and that fits the genre. I mean, fantasy is it really lends itself to third person. I write first person. I think I generally prefer to read in first person. Like my stories are very character driven, so I think it kind of follows naturally. But I also like really pushing myself. I started a book that is based on like letters.
Fun.
I forget that. I can always say that word wrong. I'm really horrible with words. But whatever that voice is that starts with an E and has P's and S's in it.
I don't know, but
I'm trying that.
Letters are cool.
It's so hard. So I might blend that, like I blend the genres. But yeah, first person. I think I would like to do actually some more pure fantasy stories. And maybe I'll try third person, but first person, like Daryl said, it comes naturally and it's easier for me.
That's cool. Okay, so hopefully, I think, especially if you're writing character driven, the character arc is often the most important part of the story. So what's your method for developing it? We'll go back to Daryl.
You know, it's funny because I was looking at these questions and I was like, I never realized how much I don't think about my process. Like, I never think about any of this stuff. I just kind of do it. And so I have no idea how I would explain it. But, like, I guess my method for developing character arc, usually what I do is I'll figure out where I want them to go. So a lot of the times I'll think of a really late in the story event that I want them to go through, or even the ending. Sometimes I'll have the ending thought out and I'm like, okay, how do I get there?
Yeah.
And so naturally, because I do like to sit in the character's head, and this is actually why I can't write in public, because I'll sit there and talk to myself.
That's neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll sit there and be like, how the hell would he do this? And then I'll just like think of scenes. And I do this in my day-to-day life, even when I'm not writing, is like sometimes I'll like interview or like go through like imaginary conversations with myself. And
I do that all the time.
Yeah. And so then one thing will just slowly build to another until I find my way towards somewhere that might lead me to the thing that I told myself we were going to. And that seems to have worked for me. There was one time when writing Silver Boy where I knew the ending, but I had no idea how to get there. So I wrote about 100 pages and realized I don't know what this story is about anymore. So then I had to start over and I had to do a lot more outlining.
Right.
But generally what I do is I know who it is and I know where I want them to go. It's just, you know, figuring out how I'm going to get to that point.
Yeah. I think I have a similar path in that I also often am starting with the goal. Like, I'm like, this is where I want the characters to kind of end up. I don't necessarily know the specifics of the ending, but I know like the epiphany, I guess I want them to have. And then I'll go back and say, okay, who would have trouble with this epiphany? You know, like what is the character's problem? Like in my first book, Hours of Golden Laughter, I knew Xiao was an alcoholic and I wanted him to kind of take control of his life. And so I ended up making like his alcoholism a lot worse because that was stopping him from being in control. And so then I'll go in and add obstacles that are challenging the thing that they can't get past. And I also do a lot of discovery writing. So it tends to be a little bit loose. Like I usually have a pretty strong sense of where they are at the beginning. I'll write a lot about that. And then I know where they kind of want them to end up. Yeah. You're ready. Take your time. Yeah. So character arc.
It's also it's funny. It's parallel, and I was thinking maybe it's related to point of view, but it sounds like we all have similar processes. And for Upspark, I had the last scene. I knew the startup, and I had the very last scene, and I connected the dots. 1 second.
Take your time.
Yeah, so I started out totally being a pantser, and yeah, like I don't know how these dots connect. We're gonna go on our journey. It's gonna be fun. But as I'm honing my craft, I'm more of a plantser now. And like Daryl said, sometimes you have to plot pieces to make it smoother, and you realize how you want to underscore certain pieces, or certain pieces ended up being dead ends and all of that. But the character art, it's funny. So wood energy is the creative energy. And for me, like when I'm exercising, I'll be running on the treadmill, and that's when I'll like process and think about the characters, all that wood energy.
No, well, that's true. I know exercising is often a good time to be like, things are connecting.
Yeah, yeah. So it
always happens
along the film.
It always happens when you're like not trying to think about it.
Yeah,
right? And you don't have your phone or a piece of paper nearby.
Yeah.
There was one week last week, or not last week, it was like the other week. I was walking my dogs through the park before my dog started freaking out. And the whole time I was like, that would be a really fun way to go with a children's novel. And then of course, I didn't have a notepad. I didn't have anything. And I was walking my dog, so I couldn't just stop to write on my phone.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh my God, that should be the next project. But don't tell anybody, because the last time I told anybody, I ruined my own release.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we all kind of go at the end of it backwards. Okay, characters' backstory. So this is often things that won't happen directly in the book, but it might include their ethnic background, it might include their education, it might include their family. How do you create it, and how much do you know before you start writing?
I'll jump in. So again, as I write, it's kind of evolved. With the 5 Element series, it has a strong component about Indigenous communities and heritage, but I didn't plan that at all. So it was, and I really like researching. So it was a really fun component to it, but I didn't plan it at all. And now I do plan it out more. Just how can I increase the tension the most? You know, what kind of backstory is going to really raise the stakes here? So
that's cool, because one thing I really enjoyed about Upspark was all the kind of, like, I don't know, I could tell you had done research, and there'd be a time where you'd be like, okay, we're gonna like learn about this almost in the book, and I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thrilled that I got someone from the Lenape tribe to actually read it and, you know,
give you feedback.
Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's cool. I don't know how I create backstory. Like, I don't really think about it. It's just kind of like, well,
like, okay, let me ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Why did you make Nick? So Nick is in Drown, and he's Latino, but he doesn't really speak Spanish. That was interesting. Why?
I don't know. Okay, so this is a long story with Drown in particular, because in my author's note I talk about the long 10-year journey it took, because it started as a screenplay and then it got shelved, and then like 7 years later I was playing with the idea of writing a musical, just because I was doing a musical at the time. And I was like, oh, I have this script that we never did anything with. But then I was like, well, this is going to be really hard. So while I was doing that, I started drawing the comics on Instagram. And then I was like, well, I finished the musical script, and I just felt like, okay, this is going to cost like a ton of money that I don't have in order to even start this project. So let me just shelve it. But what can I do with the story? And so the entire time I didn't think about the races at all, like their ethnic background or anything, because I'm like, okay, this is going to be either a movie or theater, so it doesn't even matter, because casting will determine it. But then I sat there and I was like, let's write this into a book, because that's something I'd never done before, but always wanted to. So then as I was writing, like, it started very, very generically. So I don't ever talk about a lot of their ethnicity very early on. At least I don't think so. And if I did, it was very subconscious. And then as I was writing the first couple chapters, I was like, you know what? What if I just leaned into what I always envisioned them as? Because I wrote Eric as sort of a picture of myself. So I'm like, okay, let's make him Filipino. But then I always kind of pictured him being like sort of like a light-skinned, more East Asian looking kid rather than a Southeast Asian looking kid. And so I was like, let's make him Korean Filipino. And then with Nick, I was like, well, I see a lot of, you know, white pairings. And like, I really hate thinking about this too much, just because it's never the focus of the story. At least it hasn't been yet. But I was like, well, there's a lot of talks with the latest Asian movie releases where it's like it's an Asian girl, but then all of her love interests are white, like what happened with To All the Boys I Loved Before. So I was
Right.
like, well, I mean, I didn't really think about it, but he could be Latino. I like Latino guys. So then he just became Latino, and the reason that he became a Latino who can't speak Spanish is because I don't speak a word of Spanish. So I was like, how am I gonna get around this? Because
but that's very realistic. There are lots of Latinos who don't speak Spanish.
yeah. My husband was one of them. He lies. He can speak Spanish and he's Mexican, but he's not confident in it. But I do have other friends who are Mexican who don't speak a word of Spanish. But it sort of was one of those, sorry, this is like a really long story.
No, that's fine.
But it was one of those things where I gave myself a problem and I didn't know how to solve it, so I just worked around it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't speak Spanish, but I want him to be Hispanic, so we're just gonna say he doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And it's funny how like a lot of this stuff happens on its own. So like his signature, like Nick's signature signature like trait is that he has a beauty mark next to his right eye. I never planned that. What had happened was when I was drawing an old version of the box art of like the cover art, I accidentally made a mark on his face, and I was like, I don't want to draw this again. And so I'm like, you know what? He just has a beauty mark.
That's so cool.
This becomes a thing that like problems arise during the natural course of development that turn into solutions in and of themselves.
I think as for the process, we just have to stay open and it's for the better of the work and us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that we're all kind of pantsery or discovery, right?
What is that word?
So
going by the seat of your pants when you're writing?
Yeah, flying by the seat of your
pants. Is that
what
that means? See,
yeah.
Because I know it as like pulling somebody's pants down.
Yeah, that is another use of it.
That too. That's, the romance aspect.
See, because I've learned so much being...
Don't plan.
See, I've learned so much about the writer community just being on Twitter that I'm very confused a lot of the time. I'm like, why don't people consider this romance? Because they don't get together in the end, because it's very romantic.
Yeah. It's true. There's lots of random rules and expectations.
I also didn't know that there are people out there that don't read prologues and epilogues. And I'm like, but they're part of the story.
Yeah, that threw me a lot. Sorry, that was something
part of that too is on the ebooks. They don't always start on the prologue. So
that's weird.
Yeah, is it? Yes. I'm like, which book is it where I wrote the prologue? So what you can do is write something to the effect of, 10 years later to key in like, oh, reader, go back and look, there's a prologue. It's just not showing up because you can't set it. The software itself determines the start of the book.
Yeah, that is weird.
You would think that it would.
Yeah,
I know. I was shocked in that because prologues are really common in epic fantasy, but like if you didn't read my like 5,000 word prologue, you would be lost.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you're started at the prologue because I don't remember having to look back.
Yeah. I think
it might be if some of the shorter prologues, maybe it's easier for it to think.
Yeah, because it does have some like AI trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? Oh, sorry. Did you have something else to say, Dara?
Oh no, I was just a side comment. They don't let it be easy.
I always think I have my backstory figured out. I think like I'll go through and like I have prompts that I ask myself, like, what have they learned? What are their skills? What are their hobbies? But a lot of it does come out in the story where I'll be like, oh, it would have been really convenient if this character could do this, or if they couldn't do that. And then I'll like have to go back to like add some breadcrumbs so it makes sense at the scene where I actually realized it. But I think that often the backstory comes from things I want to explore, things that aren't. Sometimes it's like one of my characters, Nanami, has a huge family. She's one of like 13 or 14 children. My mom is one of 11 children. And so that's something that was very interesting to me and I kind of knew about, but I didn't have direct experience. So I will pick things that I'm like, this is interesting and I want to think about it more. And that's, yeah, comes from.
That's funny that you like actively pick them, because when writing Silverboy, I did not, because he was already an established character. I was like, how the hell am I going to write about football? I know nothing about football. Another problem. So I just avoided it. I wrote one scene about football and then threw in a couple of references.
That was one of my comments in beta reading. I was like, I don't think he plays football.
I don't. And so I had to do a lot of research just to get.
I was like, Andrew's not into football.
Yeah, that's why there's only one scene where they're actually tossing around a football.
Right.
Because I didn't know how to write it. Like,
right, and he had done it in Drown, where you didn't have to talk about it. So you had to at least acknowledge, but then you were moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also is just, writing in first person makes it so that you can't always tell certain things. So like there was a comment, I think during beta reading where somebody, I don't remember who it was or even what the comment was, but I think they were talking about wanting to learn something more about a specific character, and I'm like, but he doesn't spend time with him.
Right.
How am I supposed to
Yeah, you can't do the scene if the character's not there.
Yeah. And I'm like, maybe he's a ghost. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, big change. So you talked about this a bit, Daryl. What are appearances? How specific is your mental image? That you told us it's not specific until you started drawing, and then it evolved.
So okay, I don't. You know how people fan cast stuff?
Sure.
So a lot of the times when I write, I have an idea of an existing person. So like with my character Mackenzie, who shows up in both books, when I was writing the initial screenplay, I was like, Kat Dennings, I like her. She has a striking image. She has that kind of attitude. And so I'm like, okay, Mackenzie is Kat Dennings. And as I went through through all the characters, I was like, Andrew is a young Lucas Teal. Eric is me. And then I don't remember who I said for Nick. I think it might have been like Taylor Lautner at the time. And so it was just like, these are the people in my mind. And it changes as it naturally changes as like
the character does.
Made. Yeah. So like it's funny because when people talk about fan casting, I still have these images in my head, but then I also take into account all the changes that have naturally happened over the course of developing the characters, like the beauty mark or like how they're being drawn now. And so I would say that in terms of specificity, it usually is just based on other people. And it's like, well, how does this person look? What can I write about them? And how would they behave? But obviously I can't just be like, oh, so Taylor Lautner decided to lean in and make out with the guy who looks just like me. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
No, I do fan casting too for my books. And I don't always do it at the beginning. But actually while I was writing Trials of Fire and Rebirth, the one that's coming out in June, there was an actress who, I almost exclusively watch Korean and Chinese dramas. I don't know why, but I do.
My mom too. I don't know why either.
Moving on. So there's this actress in China who, for some reason, always plays male characters. Like she's not supposed to be a woman. She's not supposed to be a woman at all. She's not like disguised. She's like a man, but she's a woman playing that character. And I was a little surprised by it because China in general has a lot of censorship laws, and so I'm not totally sure why that doesn't hit any censorship, except for I think that there is a traditional aspect in China where women and men played cross-gendered a lot. But so anyway, I saw that character who she had a very androgynous look, where she was convincing as a man, but as you're watching her, you're like, wow, there's something feminine, and then you look it up and you're like, oh, she's an actress. So that was like on Ning. Like as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally see on Ning. So then I grabbed a bunch of pictures of her, and that would be what I referenced when I needed something. But yeah, I think that I'm actually not always specific at the beginning, and it's usually when I have to describe them that I'll start thinking like, what actor or actress looks like this person, or someone in my real life too sometimes. How about you, Nicole?
This is my Achilles heel. Like I definitely need to do what you guys do and find a specific person and have that as like a cheat sheet beside my document as I'm writing. Like
Right.
I'll forget what color eyes they have, and then I have to like search through the whole thing and like get it right and like keep notes to myself. It really is. It's my Achilles heel. Like I have a condition where I don't recognize faces very well, and I didn't realize till I started writing like that has other ramifications, like not just, you know, when I'm in a crowd or feeling highly emotional, but I think in general, I'm not noting people's faces. Right. So yeah, it comes through. It was actually a huge plot hole in that, I called it worst story ever written. It was the paranormal romance that was mystery. So she was like fangirling over this vampire prince, and then she met him in person, but she didn't recognize him. And my beta readers are like, how does she not recognize him? Wasn't she obsessed about him? I'm like, oh yeah, not normal. That's right. Yeah.
That's really funny. That makes sense though. It makes sense.
It does make sense, because like I don't know if you ever run into like a famous person that you like are into in real life.
You live in California.
It happens a lot because I live in LA.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, are you? No.
Yeah, if you
but
don't expect to see someone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Out of context, it'll throw it throws me off, and I really question now. I don't know what's normal, so thank you. That gives me some validation.
No, you're not the only one. My husband, I don't know if you've watched Teen Wolf, like the new one.
No,
but my husband was really into one of the actors, Colton Haynes, because Colton Haynes is like openly gay, and he came into my husband's job, and I was in the parking lot, and they were standing there talking to each other.
Oh, how cool.
And the husband comes into the car, like thinking nothing of it. And I'm like, you realize who that was, right? And he's like, no. I'm like, that was Colton Haynes, the guy that you've been like freaking out over. And he's like, what?
Needed lighting and makeup.
Yeah. And I'm like, it really is about context, because if you don't have the context, then it's like, that's super weird. Like when you run into a teacher out of class.
Yeah. Like, yeah. You're like, oh, do I know you? Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't exist outside the classroom. What do you, like, that's
Thank
weird.
you. That was like the validation. I changed the scene, but still, like I feel normalized and validated. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, it's weird. It really is weird seeing people you know out of context of how you know them.
Definitely. Because of the pandemic, there were a bunch of people that I met online through Zoom and then saw them in town for like, you know, community organizations. And it would be like, we would talk for a few minutes before being like, oh, wait, you're the person I see every Thursday night.
Mm-hmm. It's so weird. There was one day I was working as a cashier, and I don't know if you guys know Melanie Martinez. So she's a singer, very distinct look. She's got like a gap tooth and then like two-toned hair. And she comes in, I don't notice. Like she's standing in front of me, I look up and I'm like, that's Melanie Martinez's hair. And I'm like, that's not her. But then she hands me her card and it's her. And I'm like, wait, but you're like
famous.
You are her.
That's so
Because
cool.
like you don't think about it, because like she wasn't dolled up the way that Melanie Martinez usually is. and like she was just a very normal, you know, dressed sort of like a normal LA hippie hipster kind of person. And I'm like, she looks like her, but she doesn't look like her, and she's way smaller in person than you think she's gonna be.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
a
it's
big one.
like, what is going on? And it just blows your mind when you realize that, oh, that's what they actually look like in real life. And it's like, it looks exactly like them, but it doesn't. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird what happens.
You're
For
totally
sure.
giving me the urges to like go up to LA and try and spot some celebrities, except with the kids, like I haven't watched any movies or anything in 10 years. I wouldn't recognize anyone. But I love the stories. Like I want to like,
Yeah, it's
search
a
out.
trip. Like there's a lot of times when I'll do a double take and I'm like, wait, that's not them. Like it happens a lot. Like it happens so much working customer service in LA, just because they're all around here.
Mhm.
And it just it boggles the mind a little bit, because I'm like, you're the kid from the Disney Channel. But then like he's just a regular man now, and I'm like, this is so weird.
Yeah. All right. We have about a minute before our meeting ends. Is there anything you guys want to say before we sign off?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was fast.
I know.
I feel like I talked through most of it.
No, I think we're all talkers because we're all writers.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised though, because on Twitter, a lot of writers will use one-word replies, and I'm like,
You have so much to say.
yeah.